looks like it's recording now. Lovely. So welcome, Assam and Yavana, to tonight's webinar, and to those who are listening back. Tonight we're going to be looking at goal setting, and I've just had a little bit of a check-in with Assam and Yavana as well, and they're also interested in not only goal setting but also information about budgeting. Tonight is really about the goal setting part. We did an earlier webinar in the year, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, that it was focused on budgeting. But just hearing that that's something that you're both interested in, what I will do at the end or wherever it feels appropriate, I will share with you the template. It's just a very basic budgeting template that I have, and we might just have a little bit of a play around in it, just in terms of giving you an idea of how you could structure your thinking around your budgeting and setting goals and that kind of thing. So we'll get started. Welcome, both of you, and obviously those who are listening back as well. Fabulous. I always get the attendee list and I can see all the different areas and faculties which all of you amazing students are studying and the amazing work that you're doing. So it's lovely to have you along. And I always like to acknowledge too that although you're sort of tuning in and checking in with different bases of knowledge, so you're coming, so we've got, you know, people who are studying in health, science, education, business, all of the skills. Perhaps it may not be all centered around personal finance, because we're not likely to have learnt anything about personal finance. It's not something we get taught at school. It's usually probably something you're picking up from your parents or peers, or maybe you've picked up a book here and there, but it's something that we're not typically taught. But all of the amazing skills, obviously your, you know, problem solving skills, critical thinking, diligence, all of those amazing skills that you obviously are demonstrating in your studies can, you know, very easily benefit you in your personal financial life as well. Sometimes we forget about that. We kind of carry in our mind maybe an idea. Sometimes a lot of people think of it's usually linked to their mathematical ability a lot of the time, where we're thinking I'm good at personal finance or I'm not good at it because somebody's told me that I was or I wasn't, particularly as a young child. And if you weren't particularly good at math, sometimes that's something that somebody carries. But personal finance, they say, if we were to give it rough percentages, is, you know, like 20% head knowledge and 80% behavior. So it's all about, you know, setting up good behaviors and routines. And like what we're going to talk about tonight is setting goals for yourselves as well, because personal finance is such a broad topic. And Yavana's also mentioned before she's interested in investing. That's going to be a topic in the future. So we do have a webinar every month, and we do kind of focus the topic. So yeah, keep an eye out for those. So we've got some specifically around, you know, saving strategies. That one's coming up. We do have one about investing, and we have a specific one for more longer term planning as well. So yes, so keep an eye out for those ones. Before we start the acknowledgement of country, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands from which we're all connecting from today for this online webinar. And I pay my respects to the elders past and present, and recognise and celebrate their connection and role in caring for country over thousands of years. May their wisdom and strength be with us today. So just a quick little bit about myself. So you've got some idea. Neither of you have come across me before, but for those listening back may have. My background is in accounting. So I'm a CPA, spent the first part of my career, 12, 13 years as a corporate accountant, primarily in management accounting, budgeting, helping large tops, you know, ASX 100 companies manage their financial resources, make longer term plans and strategies, and ensure that they were matching and aligning how they spent their money with their goals and vision. So that's kind of my background. And then I moved into education and teaching. So teaching accounting, I did teach at Southern Cross University, but I also teach at Swinburne and another institute in Melbourne. I also have a financial counselling qualification as well, and as I'll mention at the end and chat a little bit about how you can work with me one-on-one if that's something you feel like you'd like to do. So really simple agenda for tonight, just covering off 3 kind of key things. So I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but we can sort of shape it to Assam and Yavana. You know, if you've got questions along the way, it's only the three of us, so please, turn on your mic if you've got anything particular that you want to ask or direction you might like to take this. You're here, so you get to do that. But yeah, we're just going to really sort of talk about, at that general kind of sense, what are some of the sort of short and long-term financial goals that you might have? How do you create a plan to achieve them? And just some tips around how to stay motivated and focused on achieving those goals. So I guess before we get started, just to get a sense from both of you, and you can use the chat if you like, or microphone, do you have, and I know now that you're studying, so my son was sharing that sort of transition, so you were in full-time, well-paying work, and now you've moved into studying and doing a PhD. So it's a big change for you recently in terms of your financial situation. Was that part of a longer-term goal, or do you have goals financially? You don't have to share them, but do you sit down and sort of formalize that, or what's your current approach to your financial goals?
Yeah, I both short-term and long-term, both.
Yes, you have both, and you've got an idea, and do you write them down, or do you sort of quantify them? Are you quite clear on what they are?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yovana, how about yourself? Are you quite structured in your approach to your financial goals?
I haven't been that structured lately just because there's been a lot of changes in my life in the last few months. But I do want to maybe set like a bit more of a structured goal towards, long term. And it's not so much about budgeting. I don't think I struggle in that sense at all. It's more of like how to invest and stuff in the future, how to do better with what I have, I guess.
Okay, great, cool. You might benefit from the investing webinar as well coming up, so that will be really helpful. Are you currently working in Australia, and do you get superannuation, or what's your situation in terms of that kind of retirement longer term?
Yeah, I have been working. Currently not, just because I recently moved to the Gold Coast. I was living in WA and working there. So I was doing a casual job, but it was 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. So for the last 2 years. So it was a bit full on.
Oh my goodness, that is very full on. So you're kind of coming up for air now, because that's a massive regime. So you would have got some super, I guess that's kind of, I always, what's hard about how is it that we could feel good about our finances? It's a really challenging thing to do, because we've got so many balls that we're juggling, right? So we're earning money now, or we maybe have reduced our income depending on how, our situation with our studies. We're wanting to make sure that when we finish work, eventually we're going to have enough money in retirement. We want to live for now, and we also want to maybe save up and buy a house. So there's all of these things that are all going on at once. So what we kind of talk about is maybe you both have an approach to that already that works for you, but I'll share some of some ideas of what you might do to sort of balance those, but also to protect your peace around finances is a really big one, because we're bombarded all the time with things that attack that peace, in terms of things that cause anxiety, like obviously all of the issue around which my son was sharing too, that obviously in Australia, if you've just moved or arrived, that it's expensive. So you can get this shock, and there's all of the news is telling us that the cost of living, it's all expensive, the housing, and everything just feels overwhelming. So that's when you need to sort of, I guess, the role of financial goals gives you that focus, and it helps you to also protect your peace, because it allows you to stick to your lane. What am I trying to achieve? And you take action towards that, which is going to remedy some of that anxiety, as opposed to listening to everything else, because it can be quite stressful. So I'm hoping that I can cover off some of these things. So firstly, it's kind of, some of this will be quite general, and I think listening to both of you, you'll probably know this. Hopefully you'll still benefit from just listening to it and getting an idea. For some students, they may not have ever sat down and even thought about their financial goals, maybe, just quite short term in terms of living paycheck to paycheck, what am I going to do? And they might just have superannuation as a result of working here in Australia or somewhere else in the world that also has retirement funds. But what I want to make sure, and you're probably both very clear, is that if you want to make progress, it's like with your studies, You've got to, so if you want to progress with your money financially, you need to set financial goals. It's just a no-brainer. So I imagine that you did the same with when you decided to just take on your postgrad study. There must have been a path or a goal that you're trying to achieve. Obviously, it's the qualification itself, but it's also what that enables. And you'll have goals along the way, checkpoints, if it's assessments that you've got to hand in, or some you've got that, you've got very defined checkpoints in terms of your PhD program. And sometimes we can get a little bit fatigued with goals, and our financial ones can be ones that can be left out because we've used up all of our good, goal setting abilities with other parts of our life. Maybe it's, planning holidays or, even in our studies or work, but really important to set goals, not only so you can achieve them, but you can also, there's a financial well-being that's experienced from establishing them and making progress. So yes, it's the achievement of the goal, but if you've got to have that goal. And as illustrated here as well, which you can both appreciate as well, the fact that, on the left-hand side of this diagram, this illustration, is without those goals, you kind of end up spinning around and round and round. You're not actually going anywhere, as opposed to having clear goals where you know what you're aiming towards. And that's really important. And that's going to make your money work most effectively for you as well, is in achieving those specific goals, as opposed to just churning round and round. And if you get stuck in that sort of churning of not really having any goals, you're likely to be spending money on things that don't really matter to you. And as they say, you're probably spending money on things to try and impress people that don't matter to you as well. So yeah, really important to have those goals that are aligned with your values of what you want to achieve, what you want to do. So a bit of a quote here in terms of, that they really clarify life, they illuminate possibilities that are otherwise invisible as well. So with that goal, if you know that's what you want to achieve, you can then start to get creative about how am I going to achieve it. If you don't set the goal at all, you just think, oh no, I'm never going to own a home. Well, you've sort of checked out on that. But if you set that goal for yourself, I do want to own a home, well, you start to look at, well, what would that home be? What is home? And what do I need to do? What is, what I need to do with my money in order to achieve that? Or what kind of living arrangement, or how would it work? So it allows you to get creative and make these goals come true. So we're just going to talk a little bit about short-term goals, long-term goals. We've only got the hour, and we could probably talk one of each of these topics for the whole time. So I know I'm sort of covering a lot, and we've obviously got medium-term goals in there too. It's not so much about defining what they are, but more for you to, after having listened to them, hopefully give yourself an opportunity. Maybe it's at the end of the webinar, when you've got a bit of space and time, is to actually write out what are some of the key things that you really want to achieve, and make sure that they're aligned to your values, they're not someone else's dream. So obviously our short-term goals are things that can be achieved within a year, and that's obviously how businesses plan and see them too. So examples of things that that you may be working through, it could be that you're saving up for a wedding, paying off credit card, any debts, sort of consumer debt that you might have, creating an emergency fund, saving for a holiday. If you have a home, maybe it's making, repairs or home improvements, things that you would achieve within a year. So I'm sure you've both heard of the SMART goals, and I don't want to go over them, but not to gloss over them or minimize them, because they are really important, and we can actually sometimes forget as well. It's very important when you are setting the goals and thinking about them, is to drill down on them. So not just to carry this sense of, yes, I want to own a home one day, but it's actually getting clearer on that. When is that? By what age? What would that goal, what would that home be as well? So making sure that it is specific and measurable, that it's achievable too. So, looking realistically at where you are, what your current resources are, how long, what's your time horizon in terms of that, achieving that goal, and then how much money you then need to have to be putting towards it. So you can kind of do that check-in. Is it achievable or not? And then maybe it's okay, you thought you were going to buy $1 million home, but now you're going to pull back on that and say, okay, you know, based on where I am right now and my earning capacity, maybe it's a $700,000 home, you know, whatever it is. So you can start to make some of those reasonable adjustments instead of just carrying, okay, I want a home. You're very clear on what it is, and you can then work towards that. So there are sort of short-term goals. Our longer-term goals are obviously looking out, you know, 5, 10, 20 years. And these are different for everyone. Everyone's different scenarios and situations. And a lot of it obviously has got to do with, you know, what are the resources that you have available to you at the moment, and then your earning capacity. And that can vary obviously so largely depending on, you know, what field you're in, and yeah, what your situation is. If you are doing, you know, working to achieve these goals with somebody else, so if you're married or if you're single, you know, all of that obviously makes the time horizon different, and you've got to just work within, you know, the situation that you're in. So yeah, some of those longer term goals could be saving for a home, or maybe you've bought one already and you want to pay that mortgage off. Planning for retirement. You might even I've worked with quite a few students doing PhD programs or postgrad programs in health that have wanted to go out and start a new business. So it may be looking at, you know, what is that business that you're wanting to start, and sort of giving that some specifics. So knowing, you know, how much money is it going to take to start that business and run it, and what does that look like? So knowing what those goals are. But really important here is that final point is making sure that it really aligns with your life aspirations. But, you know, as Yvonne's also shared, that things have happened for her recently that have changed or maybe weren't expected, that whenever we do make goals, we've always, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, is making sure you've got flexibility, because we've got to adapt. Like things will change in your life, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't aim for something. You still must aim for something, but it may be that at certain points when you reassess your goals, maybe you're somebody who is, you know, looks at it every year and reviews them, but maybe you're more relaxed about it, and every 5 years or so you get a sense of what you want to do and you review them, and then you realize, well, no, this I don't, you know, maybe you had this vision of wanting to start a business, but you start working and you really enjoy the work that you're doing, and you like working for somebody else or in a different capacity, and you realize that, well, no, that's not, I don't really feel like that's a goal for me anymore. So you can obviously need to update and review them. They're not a set and forget kind of thing. It's something that you should review and think about and check in with, to make sure that they're really still relevant to you. Obviously things change a lot. So the illustration here is more, yeah, looking at, you know, the big picture kind of things. You know, obviously the rocket ship taking off, and yeah, what are the things that you kind of dream of experiencing and wanting to achieve over that kind of longer term. And sometimes it's useful to think, because this is something that businesses do, small to large, and if they don't, they're unlikely to be successful. So sometimes it can be useful to think about yourself and your money in a business sense, if that helps you, because sometimes it can feel very personal and we can end up feeling negative about our situation, and we lose that opportunity to think creatively about what the possibilities are because we take it personally. But if you can kind of step outside of it and think about your finances, you know, almost like you're running a business, like you're the CFO, you know, what are the goals? What is the vision for myself, for my life? And then, okay, I've got X resources. So how can I utilize those to ensure that I can achieve those strategies and those goals, which is very similar to what a business would do. And then you can sort of start to make tactical decisions about short-term things that you can do, but with that eye on the longer term of what you want to achieve. Because if you don't have those longer term goals, it's likely that your money just gets frittered away at sort of short-term things, if you don't have a vision for it. And even if you want to just make sure that you're putting money aside for the longer term, you know, if it's for a house or a business, or you're not even sure what the name of it is, it can just be useful to have a system where you're putting money away and building up perhaps a bucket of money that could be used for those larger things, just so that you know that it kind of gives you that peace of mind. So then and it's a bit of a budgeting, kind of moving into budgeting here a little bit, but and I might share in the worksheets how you could go about doing some of that as well. How does this, I just want to check in, I know I don't want to talk the whole time, Masam and Yvonne, in terms of your short and long-term goals, you know, do you have a big list of them, or are you quite clear and you have a small list? What works for you?
I think it's all good. What you were saying, these are the actually normal goals for everybody should have. Yeah.
Yeah. And goals that you have for yourself. So yeah, it is quite similar.
Actually, we have goals in our mind, but I didn't write it down anywhere or even any plan, anything. But that's why I'm here actually.
Good. And then maybe it might prompt you to write them down, or if you're not a writing person, you know, even in an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, just to have something that you
I like to write, no problem.
Right, yeah, I do too. Prefer it to just have a notepad that's maybe, you know, that you might just decide this is my financial notepad. Because it's quite powerful once you start to write it down, and you know that it's something that you can continue to review, so you don't have to get it right the first time. But once you've written things down, when you're away from it, your mind is actually in the background still ticking it over and thinking about it, and it actually gets attracted to information that can help you to achieve that goal. Because if you don't write it down, your brain doesn't think it's important, so it won't really think about it, but you're kind of giving it importance. So yeah, I think it would be good to write it down. And Yvonne, you know, again, you say the same, you know, it's quite a common list. Most people, although we're so different, we do generally have the same sort of goals. Do you have a big list, or do you have what's your goals, financial goals, or what are they like?
It is a little bit similar to the one you have there. Definitely saving for a home. I'm actually from Canada and my partner's from Scotland, so we always want to have a little bit of savings as well to be able to travel back home and visit family. But yeah, home is a big one for us. We really want to be settled. We've been traveling for like 7 years, so that's a big one on our list at the minute. Yeah.
Okay, amazing, great. And then what we might talk about is just even like some quick sort of little strategies to working out, well, how big should each of those buckets kind of be? And then, you know, whatever money you've got left over, you can really sort of channel towards that saving for a home goal, you know, if you like. Yeah, we'll have a look at that as well. So, and I guess the additional thing is that's tricky, right? Is balancing, as I kind of talked about, is the short and the long. You know, you're wanting to enjoy now and live your life, but you're also wanting to make sure that you're providing for the future as well. And that's where, luckily, you know, well, in Australia and a lot of other countries have retirement funds, so we'd be putting money away for that. But then it's working out how much you want to be putting away to achieve your long-term goals, like by buying a house. And some of that comes down to, you know, you again working through the specifics of that scenario, looking at how much money you've got currently, how much you've got coming in together, if we're using your scenario, Yvonne. And then it would be, you know, making sure that all of the most important things to prioritize, obviously your current home, housing situation, electricity, you know, you want to make sure all of those, it's like Maslow's hierarchy, right? So making sure that you've got all those base needs covered. And then if you've got any consumer debt at all, that there would be a priority to pay that off as quickly as possible. Once you've got rid of those payments, that's going to free up money that you could then be putting towards a longer term goal. So there's kind of a couple of stages of focus that I would recommend. And that would be definitely attending to consumer debt first. So that's any personal loans, credit cards, car loans, afterpay, anything like that. So you want to be getting rid of those, and then deciding that that's no longer something that you would be doing. It's a very costly way to live, very financially inefficient, and if we're talking about health, it's not one of the basic good hygienes. So if we can get rid of all of that consumer credit, that would be great. And then you would be looking at establishing an emergency fund. So Yvonne, it's a little bit like you're sort of saying you like to have a bit of money put aside for travel. Masam, you may have the same if you're wanting to travel back home as well, or what that situation is. You might want to have set aside some money for that. Most of the time, the quantum guidance is usually that you would have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses put aside, in a high interest savings account. You don't want that invested because you want to be able to access it and not be pushed to access it at a time where maybe the market is low. So I feel like if you put that into a high interest, you might get 5.5% for it at the moment, put it into a high interest saver. So that would be a 3 to 6 months expenses as a quantum that would be recommended. Now that's not a set thing, if you feel like that's really if in the scenarios that maybe you lost your job, how quickly would it be for you to get money back? I know it can be slightly different as you're studying at the moment, Masam, as well. We can talk more about that because as I said at the beginning, it's kind of a season that you're in, and I know other students will feel it too, which is where you're in a bit of a different scenario because you're really focused on your studies and your qualification. So your income is not what it was, but it will go back to and hopefully increase. So it's kind of living to make sure, hopefully, if you've built up funds, that you're drawing them down, but you're not going into debt. That you may have a little bit of extra income that may cover some of that, but I guess for that season, yes, you don't want to be putting yourself into debt, but after that, your situation will change. So if I come back to, sorry, the sort of the priorities in terms of what you could work through. So it's making sure that you're killing your consumer debt, you build up an emergency fund, any income that you are earning some of, so 15% is what they recommend is going into retirement, so going into superannuation. And then you'd have money outside of that, so you've kind of achieved all of those things, and then you would be looking to build up your funds to buy a house if that's your goal. And you'd be looking at then getting specific around when do we want it and how much have we got now, how much do we need, and then is that achievable? So it may be sort of making giving a little bit of flexibility into that scenario. So yeah, really important to sort of work through that. So in terms of when I talk about what is your sort of current situation and financial resources, I can show you this in Excel as well. I've just done a little screenshot here. And there's different ways you can write this out in a notebook too, but it's really important to before you sort of create a plan to achieve particular goals, is to have a good understanding of where you are currently. And a lot of people don't do this enough, and I find that this is really an important I would almost say habit to get into. And personally, we do this as a family, we do this quarterly. So I'll do a check-in because this is going to show you your progress towards your goals. And it also tells you, okay, what is my financial situation? In accounting, this is like a balance sheet. But really what it's telling you on an individual level is what are my financial resources? And this is going to be different for everybody. So at different stages of your life, so I've got this scenario here where I've got somebody who's got HECS debt, which is the student debt here in Australia. So it's resulting in a negative financial resources for them. Although the HECS debt is not a consumer debt, it's not a priority in terms of being paid off, although that's a separate conversation. We have a whole webinar on HECS. But what you could see here, which would be a really good, I'm not sure if either of you done this before, is to individually, or if you're married with your partner, that you would write this out together and say, right, okay, what is it that we own? So you would be listing out all of your bank accounts. And here I've called it a just in case fund. So that's an emergency fund. So Yvonne, that might be like your travel fund. You might have a balance in that already. You might have some superannuation, obviously, that you've earned over the last year or so. So listing all of that out. If you had already bought a home, the value of the home would be here, and then the corresponding loan or mortgage amount would be in what you owe. So the net of that is then, you know, the equity that you have in the home. Does that make sense? Do I have you, either of you ever sat down and sort of done an example like that, and sort of worked out and said, okay, right, where are we financially, Giovanna?
Yeah, I have actually, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. And do you do it often?
Not super often, but I have, like, me and my partner both sat down and did it together as well, just to see where we kind of stand and what we'd like to do.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. So that's so good and so rare. So you've got some really great personal finance skills. I'm super impressed. So that's, yeah, and that's where people will make decisions without knowing what their situation is, or they'll set goals for themselves that they think are achievable and they're not, or they may actually underdo themselves and they could have actually achieved more, and they could have, you know, so this, having a clear starting point is really, really important. So so that's great. Do you do yours by hand, or have you got it in an Excel sheet somewhere?
I've done it by hand. I just find it nicer to write it out for myself.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, absolutely. And I might say, you know, if you wanted to try doing both, like once you've written it out by hand, I love things by hand too. There's certainly a connection, isn't there? And as you do it, and there's a joy almost. But I would recommend, you know, if you wanted to track it,
yeah,
to put it into Excel, and, like, you know, in a similar kind of format to this, or you can have it however you like. And then what you could have is, I'll show you in my sheets in a minute, is I have like all of the quarters, like the months of the year. So what you do is you entering in the information for each quarter, and then I have, you can actually calculate and see what the difference is. So what the variance is, and has that gone up or down? And then it gives you kind of at that bottom line, you can see, oh, okay, our net worth or our net financial resources have gone up by 20,000 in that last quarter. Maybe that's what you were aiming to achieve. And you can think, okay, great, cool. So then you've got something to celebrate, and you've got some feedback. Or it could be that maybe you didn't achieve it, twists and turns of life, something happened, but you've got that information there. So it can help motivate you as well. But that's brilliant. Massam, have you ever done that sort of exercise of putting all of it in one page and seeing what the lay of the land looks like?
Yes, sometimes, but this is not sustainable for me. I didn't do it for, I mean, just I made it. It was just short term, but
yeah. So it might be worth having, you know, it's a kind of a good check-in. It's like a health check-in, just to kind of go, okay, where are we at? You know, what is it? Where am I? And then, so this is kind of letting you, answer that question, where am I financially? That's what this will say. And then you'll be then working through that exercise of going, okay, where do I want to be? And then once you set those goals, you can then use your budget. That's your tool that's then going to help you to achieve, get you from here to somewhere else. And you can use this as a goal setting tool. So you can have all of what you own and owe in your sheet, and you can actually set goals for yourself, you know, in terms of what you want particular accounts to be. You know, you want your home loan to be, you know, $30,000 less by the end of the year, or whatever it might be. So you would set that up as a goal, and then you could sort of track your achievement of that. Perhaps maybe for Giovanna, you might have an account, you might set up a separate fund that's for a like buying a house. And you could decide that, you want to make, you know, add 20,000 to that by the end of the year. So you could set up a column that's your goal, you know, 2024 goal. And then as you add money to that account and sort of check in each month, or however frequently you'd like, you can then see your progress towards achieving that goal. So it's not only about having the goal, but a way, a mechanism, or a system for you to check in and review your progress to it. That's what's going to really help you keep motivated as well. So so firstly, look at what are my financial resources, and then this is how I've kind of laid it out here. So you'd start based on where you are now. So say it's May, and we've got some December goals, and I just did some really basic things here that with quite small amounts of money, but it might be that, you know, so I've got goal here is to put aside 1 month's worth of living expenses. So that's being calculated. That's different for everybody. And then you might have, you want to pay off all of your high interest debt, which is, you know, credit cards, Afterpay, all of those kind of facilities, which it sounds like neither of you have. You both have pretty good financial systems, I think. But if somebody listening back does have that high interest debt, I'd be really encouraging that to be a focus for you. Get rid of that. And then so in this scenario, maybe somebody's saving for a holiday as well, and they, wanting to put $5,000 in there. So this is kind of a way to, help structure and define what those goals are. And then this is kind of the area, developing that budget that then enables you to achieve them. So all sorts of different templates that you can use. Sounds like you both handwrite yours, which is fabulous. The only thing I would say is that if you do use Excel, it makes the calculations easy and you're not going to make any errors, and you can play around with figures as well. So that's probably something to have a look at to sort of improve what you're doing. But, all of that brainstorming and ideas, I think, work really well, pen and paper. But structuring some of it, and also means that, if you are doing this with somebody else, you can send it to them, you can look at it on the screen together, you can play around with the figures, as opposed to having to recalculate it all by hand. So this is just an example structure that I'd put together. So you're kind of looking at, okay, this is a budget, this is all of the money coming in the top section, so inflows or income. I like to sometimes use different terms depending on people's background or experience with finance. Sometimes there can be negativity around, or a barrier is some of the language. So you choose language that suits you, that helps you feel connected with the budget that you're creating. So it's looking at, what is our current income, and it can be, obviously this can change. I've kind of got a scenario here where this might be a full-time Australian resident who receives Centrelink payments. So that's a government funding, and they may have a part-time job while they're studying. So I've got lots of students who are working through that kind of phase of their life, which can be pretty challenging, I know, at the moment. So it'd be working out, what are those amounts? And then what are you currently paying in terms of, so I've got a mortgage here, but that could be rent, groceries, how much do you, if you're eating out, car, all of this is for you to customize. So everybody's situation is different. And you would be, entering all of those things in. And this is where then, you kind of have a bit of a working budget in looking at, okay, where is my money going? But this is where you can then add in your goals to your budget. So as we saw on the slide before, if it was that we wanted to, put aside, increase that sort of emergency fund, we're paying off debt and we're saving for a holiday, I would then give those items a line in your budget and then work out, is it achievable? Can I hit those figures? How is it that I'm going to get to that 5,000 in terms of saving for a holiday? Paying off that high interest debt. How is it that is that possible? So I'd add those to the budget, and it might be that you find that, yes, it's really possible. I could actually, I'll actually have money left over, and then you'll get to think about, right, I could have a bit more of a fancy holiday, or do I put that extra money towards one of my bigger, longer term things like saving for a home deposit? So I would be recommending that you sort of add those goals to your budget and really play around with that budget too. And as you know, as you've both been budgeting before, that it is a living, breathing document, that we know that all of these things get updated and change quite frequently, particularly some of those things, like you might have a internet plan or a mobile phone plan with a particular company. They increase their fees, then you've got to do the shop around. So once a year at least, you'd be reviewing all of these in detail to try and make sure you've got the best deal. But the ones that you can obviously control are things like groceries, eating out. You can, really look at, how can I do that more cheaply? And then things that are discretionary. So I've kind of cut this budget off. There's lots of other different things that you could include here as well, but you might be then, making those decisions around some of those discretionary items that you spend. Is that money, once you see it all in your budget, it might come out to $1,000 a year. You could actually say, right, I want to achieve, paying off this debt and getting my emergency fund up and running. So next year, I'm not going to have any of those subscriptions. I'm going to use that money rather to achieve these goals. And this is where having those goals gives you that focus and that control. So you don't just fritter away money that's really easy. You know, someone might say, oh, you've got to go get Disney Plus because this new movie's out. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll get that subscription. And you let it tick over for a couple of months and you don't really watch it and all that kind of stuff. So it makes you get super determined and focused. So that's kind of how I would recommend including your goals into your budget, just making it a line item, which probably just seems really simple and easy, which I hope it is. And you both might have already done that already to a certain extent, particularly that I know that you've traveled and obviously organized to study here in Australia, and that takes a lot of expense. So you must have budgeted and planned that out. And I guess that the key is to kind of look at, you know, working backwards from some of those longer term goals in terms of making that call around what's achievable. So if it is that you're sort of saying to yourself, well, we want to save for a home deposit, we want to buy a house, you know, in 5 years' time, whatever your time horizon is, this is where you can play around with those different levers and say, well, what does that mean? So if we want to do that, then we need to be saving $20,000 a year. Is that possible? For some people, that might be quite straightforward. For others, it might be more challenging. So it's looking at, well, do I need to change the goal? Do I need to, maybe it's not 100,000, maybe it needs to be, and what does that mean? You know, so this is where it kind of prompts you to get really focused and determine what is achievable, be specific, and then look at, well, how do I do this? So you've got to run it through your budget. Is it possible? You know, are there small tweaks that you can make to make it possible? You know, can you increase your income? Can you reduce your expenses? You know, they're just our simple 2 levers that we've got. And then do you extend the goal? You know, perhaps it's that, okay, maybe it needs to be 7 years' time, or do you reduce the deposit amount? So it's just bringing that systematic approach, which I'm sure you're bringing to your studies, bringing that to your finances as well. And the tricky thing is that it's an emotional topic. And when you work through this, and particularly when you're working with somebody else as well, all sorts of things will come up. You'll get triggered. To not ignore those, but not let them cloud the systematic approach. So, you know, pause to kind of express a frustration or whatever the emotion is, but then to come back and go, right, well, this is where we are. This is what we want to achieve. How are we going to get there? Kind of work it through again. Maybe tapping into that kind of business, like running a business orientation, can help some people not get lost in the emotions. But it is challenging. And I guess the final sort of part of the content for tonight is really just to think about how do we stay motivated. And one of the key things that we can see from that balance sheet is tracking your progress. So if you don't track your progress, you don't know how you're going, you're not going to be motivated, you're not going to stay motivated, you're not going to enjoy the journey to achieving the goal, you're unlikely to achieve the goal too. It's going to be much more challenging. So once you're tracking the progress, you can then celebrate those victories, and definitely small ones along the way are really important to keep, you know, you're going to get that feedback loop and feel good. But obviously stay flexible and adaptable and just work through those changes. So, you know, if something changes, if you get a new job and you increase your income, you put it in your budget, you make those changes, you see what impact it is, and then make some decisions. Do we, you know, allow ourselves to have a little bit of extras, you know, through the week, but then I'm going to channel money to my goal to achieve it earlier? Or sometimes it can be the opposite. If we're presented with a more challenging situation, working through what is the impact of that, and how to still try and achieve our goals. Obviously, having a support system is really important too. So if you are in a partnered situation, that you're both on the same page, and having a digital version of your budgets and your plans can really help, that you're both seeing it, you both have input into it, and that you're sharing the achievement of the goals together. If you're not, also just having friends and family that you can share with. So it's always hard if you've got other friends and family who are wanting to do and achieve different things. They might want you to be going on particular holidays with them or driving a particular car or whatever it might be, but those things might not be important to you. So it's hard, but really important to stick to the goals that align to your values and what you want to do, and make sure you have give yourself time to check in with those and stay true to them. An example that one of my clients had shared with me, which you've probably heard of too, that really works for them is what they call the champagne goals. If you drink, that's lovely, or you might do it, you know, with chocolates or something else that you like to consume. But essentially what they do is at the beginning of the year, make goals for themselves, and they write on the champagne bottle what the goal is. So maybe it's saving $2,000 or paying off the mortgage or whatever it is, and you write it on your champagne bottle or your favorite chocolates. And once that goal's been achieved, you get to eat and consume or share that, which is just a really nice way to do it. Because we've got to make sure we do have those little small celebrations as well. Although sometimes they're very big as well, like completing your postgrad studies that you're doing, that's a big goal, which is fabulous. So yeah, I hope they're sort of, I know again, they're really simple and common sense, but probably just nice reminders for everyone too. So just to kind of wrap up, I guess, you know, having some visuals as well, just to take away with us, you know, that it's similar to what I had earlier on in the slides, is this idea of if you don't have goals, you can sort of get stuck and you circle round and round and round, you don't know where you're going. But if you've got that target, that central point that you know you're focusing on, it just, it makes it so much easier to achieve the goal, but also to have that sense of satisfaction and financial well-being as well, that peace of mind, because it's not just in the achievement of the goal, but the progress that the research shows, you know, increases your financial well-being and, you know, sense of progress and achievements, really important. And then this, you know, typical quote, but it's a goodie, oldie but a goodie. If you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. So just a nice one that fits in with setting goals. Really important to set them, write them down, but continue to review and update them as is appropriate for the twists and turns of life. But I know that we often carry them in our mind, all these different things we want to do. But I'd really encourage everybody, so Masan and Yavana who are here tonight, hopefully you go away and you sort of write down, you get motivated to write them down quite clearly, get a bit more detailed and specific about them. And anybody else listening back does the same as well. So I was just opening up to say, what are your financial goals? And you've both shared with me a little bit about what your goals are, which I appreciate. But what I might do now, I guess this is the sort of the Q&A part of the webinar. I was just going to share with you my Excel file, which is really those screenshots that you've seen already, but I'll show you kind of more in a live sense. So if I stop this share of those slides, and I'll just, because I've got it in a slightly different format. So I've just got it on my other screen here. I'm just looking to the side there. Can both of you see that all right? It's just got, how's my money flowed over the past 12 months? Is that what you can see? Yeah, beautiful. Okay, cool. So this is just another way of kind of laying out a budget. Key things is to have, you know, your income and your expenses. I've kind of got it side by side in this format. So again, what I would be recommending, and if you're, and I can actually ask Alison to send these on as well, if it's, you know, sometimes it just helps to have a starting point. But you might have, like if you're in a partnership, you might have job 1 and job 2. You'd obviously name these for whoever, you know, for yourself, your partner and your partner. I'm just doing an example of what you could do. So if you are in a partnership, that you would be adding in both people's salaries. So maybe this is, I'm just going to play around with some figures. You might have a side hustle, maybe it's $100 a week. And this is just really simple formulas, but just brings it all together. And what I'd be encouraging you to include here is your excluding tax pay. So this is, you know, actual cash, so we don't have to worry about the tax part of that. So the money that you receive into your bank each week or fortnight. And if you had any variable, so this could be a variable potentially, you can move that there, but you may have some other income depending on people's situations. But essentially you want to be sort of detailing, yeah, what is the income that we are currently earning? And then looking at all of the different expenses. And then this is where you could include your goals. So you'd be obviously updating all of this to suit yourselves, but then you might have like an emergency fund, and which may be like / travel fund, like for yourself, your partner, and then you might have home deposit. And then from here, which is where we had the different goals, you would be looking at to be updating this to July, and then setting, okay, what is it that I want to achieve by the end of the year? So that's kind of how you could track your short-term goals. But you'd want to be doing some of that analysis around. So here, this is going to help you to also define your goal in terms of what's achievable. So looking at how much maybe you've already got put aside for a home deposit, and then the time horizon for which you would like to buy one, and then how much have you really got available to be putting towards it. So in this kind of scenario, I've just put all sorts of figures in, but what we can see here is so that from this situation, it's telling us that we've got $122,200 coming in each year, and that we've got, before we even talk about our goals, we've got, so it's very low in terms of, we've got somebody who is renting. So I had a different scenario here. So I'm just going to change some of these because that might not even be anywhere near realistic per quarter. So just to give an idea, it's updating some of these. So we can see the combination of those. So it's pretty much around $80,000 of expenses. So that means then we've got about $42,000 a year to play with. So that's what that's telling us. So what we can then work out from there is how we're going to split that. So maybe we're wanting to firstly build up that emergency fund within the next 12 months. So if we're spending about $80,000 a year, so 40 is 6 months worth. So $20,000 might be your emergency fund. So you should actually be able to achieve that. So if you're going to say by the end of the year, you want that to be 20,000. And then I'm just going to say weekly, how much is that going to, do you need to put aside? So you're going to put $384 towards that each week, if that makes sense. And that then means in that first year that you can achieve that goal. And then I want to make sure this is picking up everything. Okay, good. And then, so then we would be left with, okay, so all of our other money can go towards our home deposit. So then we're going to say weekly, we're going to be able to, and it's already told us what the net is here, but we can put all of that, all $432 towards the house. And that's pretty much all of, so that means you've done like a zero-based budget, which is a really good thing to do. It means that you're assigning every single dollar that you earn a purpose. So some of the purpose is paying rent or groceries, but some of it is also, you know, achieving some of these goals. So building up an emergency fund. And then from the next year, you've got an emergency fund. So you don't need to achieve that. And then you can actually put more money towards that home deposit. So it kind of gives you that ability to work that way through. And then you can kind of do a high level calculation of, okay, so if I can put 20,000 towards a home deposit this year, and I'll be able to do 40 next year, by the end of next year, we'll have 60,000. So where does that put us? And what kind of house would that be? And what's the quantity? So you can kind of get bits more specific around that. So that's how I would recommend doing it. And then, yeah, obviously keeping track of how you're progressing, you know, if it's each month or each quarter, whatever works for you, to give yourself that feedback and that progress would be really good. So that's all I really wanted to cover off I hope that's been helpful for both of you and everyone else listening back as well. Is there any questions, Masam or Yvonne, from anything I've gone through? I hope that was helpful.
No, I don't have any question. It's good.
No?
Actually, I learned a
Yeah.
lot. Yep. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your amazing lecture.
Thanks, Masam. Nice to meet you too.
Yeah. Nice to
Yeah, it's all good on my end as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, cool. Okay, great. Okay, no worries. Well, yeah, thank you both for coming along live. It really does help people listening back as well, that there's a bit of interaction and question, you know what that's like. So yeah, I'm pleased that that was helpful, and hopefully there's little bits and pieces that you can pick up from that. And as I said, that there'll be more webinars each month, so just keep an eye out for the financial wellbeing ones and see if it's a topic that's interesting for you. And then if you're at all, I'll share back my... You see if I can share my slides back again, or is it not going to let me do this? Sometimes it goes weird. Yeah. All I will do, because I have to unplug. Let me just see if I can do it. Just because I've got so many multiple screens, which I'm sure you're all used to as well, is it kind of resets itself. Yeah, if you are at all interested, you know, wanting to sort of talk through anything specific in terms of you helping you budget with your own financial goals, you know, working on reducing any debt or making financial decisions. As I said, so my background is in accounting, and I have a financial counselling qualification too. So if there's even some of the emotional, psychological aspects of finances that you want to talk through, happy to help. You can just email skills@scpa.net.au to book a session. But otherwise, I hope you both go off and have a nice evening. Thank you for your time on a Wednesday cold night.
you too. Thank you.
Thank you
Good
very
night.
much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you.